Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. There's a strange moment of silence when everyone's phones go off at once. That's what happened in my classroom. 1 second, I was standing at the front, going over an upcoming exam, and the next, a wave of vibrations and alert tones cut through the room like a siren. 1 second, I was standing at the front, going over an upcoming exam, and the next, a wave of vibrations and alert tones cut through the room like a siren. I paused mid-sentence, watching as every student instinctively reached for their devices. A dozen screens lit up at once, their faces reflecting the same unreadable message. I frowned, adjusting the stack of papers in my hands. "All right, guys, put your phones away." Nobody moved. Their gazes stayed glued to their screens, eyes flicking back and forth as they read. Then, almost in sync, their expressions changed. Confusion, unease. One student, a sophomore sitting near the front, lifted his head. "Mrs. Jane, what does this mean?" I sighed, already feeling the beginnings of a headache creeping in. "What do you mean?" He turned his phone toward me, and I read the notification. "Emergency alert. Do not go into the forest." My brow furrowed. That's it? No explanation? No weather warning? No missing persons alert? Just a command. Don't go into the forest. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room, a few students exchanging confused glances. Some turned to me, waiting for an answer I didn't have. "I'm not sure," I admitted, trying to sound casual. "Maybe it's some kind of wildlife warning." That seemed to satisfy them just enough to go back to whispering among themselves. But I could tell that the unease hadn't left the room. It hadn't left me either. I glanced at my own phone, checking the alert again. I live in Maine, a state covered in endless miles of forest. The idea of avoiding them was impractical, to say the least. By the time lunch rolled around, the entire school was talking about it. Students in the halls, teachers in their classrooms, everyone had an opinion. I pushed open the teacher's lounge door, stepping inside just as Mr. Matthews, our gym teacher, spoke up. "It's probably a pack of wolves," he said, leaning back in his chair. His arms were crossed, his expression dismissive. "Maybe they're getting too close to town. Nothing new." A few of the other teachers nodded in agreement. "Could be," one of them mused. "Or maybe a rabid animal? Last year they had to put down that fox near the playground, remember?" I didn't chime in. I just poured myself a cup of coffee and sank into a chair, listening. It felt weird to speculate about something we knew nothing about. I wasn't in the mood for half-baked theories or conspiracy talk. I had lesson plans to grade and a headache that wasn't getting any better. Still, something about the alert didn't sit right. If this was just about wolves, why not say so? By the time the last bell rang, I was more than ready to go home. I stepped outside into the crisp autumn air, letting out a breath as I spotted Alex's car parked near the front. Relief washed over me. I wasn't sure why, but something about seeing him, about having something normal, made my shoulders relax. I walked over, sliding into the passenger seat and buckling up. Before I could say anything, he glanced over at me. "Did you get the alert?" I blinked. "Yeah, you?" He nodded. I studied him for a moment. His grip on the steering wheel was tight. "It's a weird one." Alex let out a short huff. "If we'd stayed in New York, we wouldn't have to worry about this crap." I smirked, rolling my eyes. "Oh please, you hated New York." He shrugged, but didn't argue. I turned my gaze toward the window, watching as we pulled out onto the road. The town looked the same as always. Nothing felt different. Nothing felt off. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I had almost convinced myself it was nothing. That the alert was just a precaution, that everything was fine. I had no idea how wrong I was. That night, the house smelled like garlic and butter, the scent of sautéed onions filling the kitchen. I stood at the counter, chopping carrots for dinner, my fingers moving on autopilot as I listened to the rhythmic thud, thud, thud of the knife against the cutting board. Alex leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching me with an amused smirk. He was supposed to be helping, but all he'd done so far was sneak pieces of raw vegetables from the pile I was working on. I smacked his hand away before he could grab another piece. "That's for the soup. I'm taste testing," he said, grinning like a kid caught stealing cookies. I rolled my eyes, but I was smiling. This was our routine. Simple, easy. After a long day at work, this was the part of my day that felt normal. I stirred the pot on the stove, the warmth of the burner chasing away the chill that always seemed to settle in during Maine autumns. Outside, the wind howled softly through the trees, rustling the leaves against the window. In the background, the news played softly on the TV, nothing more than background noise as I worked. The usual stuff: politics, local updates, the weather forecast, until the anchor's voice suddenly shifted. I almost didn't notice it at first, but then I did. The kitchen felt quieter all of a sudden. Everyone should stay away from the forests. I turned my head slightly toward the TV, my hand pausing mid-stir. There is something loose. Multiple bodies have been found around the national parks. Alex's expression changed immediately. His relaxed smirk faded, replaced by something sharper, more focused. Authorities are not sure whether it's a bear or a pack of wolves, the anchor continued, her voice clipped, professional. I felt my stomach tighten. Bodies. Not a body. Multiple. Alex exhaled through his nose, rubbing the back of his neck. Tim and Marcel were at the scene today, he muttered. I set down the wooden spoon I had been using, turning fully to face him now. So it's really bad? He hesitated for a second. It was subtle, but I caught it. Then he shrugged. I'll probably know more by tomorrow. The way he said it was casual, but I could tell he was choosing his words carefully. Still, if he wasn't panicking, then maybe it wasn't as bad as it sounded. Maybe the news was making it worse than it actually was. I tried to push the unease down, focusing on what I could control. I grabbed the knife again, going back to chopping. Just be careful, okay? Alex smirked, and in typical Alex fashion, he mimed pulling out a gun, making fake shooting noises. They'll regret coming after me. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. That was Alex, never taking things too seriously. And for a little while the tension eased. For a little while, I let myself believe it was nothing. The next day passed like any other. The school hallways buzzed with the usual chatter, students gossiping about the latest drama, teachers hurrying to their next class, the smell of cafeteria food lingering in the air. But underneath it all, there was something else. A tension, a quiet unease that hadn't been there yesterday. I caught snippets of conversation in the halls. My dad says someone he knows went missing last night. They found another body this morning. It's gotta be some psycho out there, right? I tried not to listen, but it was impossible to ignore. Even the teachers in the lounge were subdued, speaking in hushed tones over their coffee cups. The emergency alert from yesterday wasn't just some precaution. Something was happening, and it wasn't stopping. 3 p.m. By the time my last class ended, I was more than ready to go home and forget about everything. I slumped into my chair, rubbing my temples, when my phone buzzed against my desk. I reached for it, expecting an email or a notification, but it was a text from Alex. Got called to a case in the park. Will be home late. I stared at the message, a familiar knot of worry forming in my chest. It wasn't unusual for Alex to get called out for work. He was a cop, after all. But after everything I'd heard today, after everything the news had said, it felt different. I swallowed, thumbs hovering over the screen before I finally replied. Okay. Be careful. I waited for the little typing bubble to appear. It didn't. 4 p.m. By the time I packed up my things and stepped outside, the air had turned cooler, heavier. Autumn in Maine always came early, but today the chill felt different, like the wind carried something else with it, something unseen. I didn't have to go into the forest to get home, but parts of my route ran right next to it. A long stretch of road where the trees grew thick and tall, their branches twisting overhead like clawed fingers reaching for the sky. Usually, I liked the walk. It was peaceful, but today I felt watched, every rustling leaf, every branch creaking in the wind. I quickened my pace. The feeling only grew. I could see my house in the distance now, my front porch light glowing softly in the evening dim. Just a little farther. Just a few more steps. The wind shifted, and I heard it. A whisper of movement behind me. I turned sharply, heart hammering, but the road was empty. Just trees. Just shadows. Nothing else. I let out a breath, forcing my legs to move faster, practically running up my front steps before shoving my key into the lock and stepping inside. The door clicked shut behind me, and only then did I let myself breathe. 6 p.m. Dinner was ready. The table was set, and I was alone. Alex was usually good about texting me back, even just a quick thumbs up, a simple okay to let me know he'd seen my message. But tonight, nothing. I stared at my phone, my unease growing heavier. I sent another text. "Hey, are you okay?" The message sent, no reply. I frowned, my fingers tightening around the device. He was probably just busy. Maybe his phone had died. Maybe. The thought made my stomach drop. Alex never let his phone die. I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Once, twice. I swallowed, forcing myself to stay calm. Maybe it was just bad reception. Maybe he was still at the scene. Maybe. I tried Tim's number. No answer. Marcel's. Nothing. A cold wave of dread washed over me. 7:30 p.m. I grabbed my phone again, this time dialing the station directly. It rang twice before someone picked up. "Police department, this is Sharon." I exhaled sharply. "Sharon, it's Cassie." My voice was tight, like something was lodged in my throat. "Have you heard from Alex?" There was a pause. Not a good pause. Then a slow exhale. "We're trying to get a hold of them too." My blood turned to ice. "What? They haven't checked in," she admitted. "We sent another car out an hour ago." My fingers tightened around the phone. The room felt too small, too cold. Something was wrong. Something was so wrong. 9 p.m. I don't even remember driving there. I just remember the sight of blaring lights, ringing phones, officers pacing back and forth, the entire department on edge. More people were missing. Not just Alex, Tim, and Marcel. Others. Some from the outskirts of town, some from deeper in the woods. I sat in the lobby for hours, my mind numb, my body refusing to move. Time blurred together. At midnight, Sharon placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Let me take you home, Cassie." I wanted to argue, wanted to scream, but what could I do? I let her drive me back. I let her tell me it would be okay, but when I stepped into the house, empty, too quiet, too still, I knew she was wrong. I crawled into bed, staring at the ceiling, my breath uneven. And then, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it so fast my fingers fumbled. The screen glowed in the darkness. Another emergency alert. "Emergency alert, do not go into the forest." My stomach twisted violently. I lay there, staring at the words, my hands trembling. Something terrible was happening. And Alex was still out there. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone clutched in my hand, rereading the emergency alert over and over again. Emergency alert. Do not go into the forest. It had come through 3 times now, like a warning, like a final chance to listen. But it was too late for that. Alex was missing. Tim and Marcel were missing. More people were missing, and nobody knew why. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to force my body to rest. But my mind wouldn't stop racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured him, Alex, somewhere out there in the woods. Alone. Hurt. Or, no, I refused to think like that. I wasn't ready to believe he was gone. I gave up on sleeping. I climbed out of bed, my body heavy, and wandered downstairs. The house was too quiet, too still. I flicked on the TV, needing some kind of background noise to fill the silence. At first, I didn't even register what I was watching. And then, hundreds of cases now. I froze. The news anchor's voice was sharp, urgent, her expression tight with barely restrained tension. "People found skinned like animals." My breath caught in my throat. With no skin, no flesh, just raw muscle exposed. I grabbed the remote, turned up the volume. The screen flashed with blurred-out images. Red shapes, pink and glistening, bodies stripped bare. I could barely make out the outlines of limbs, of torsos twisted unnaturally. The camera cut back to the news anchor. Her voice wavered slightly as she continued. "At this time, authorities suspect a group of individuals may be responsible. This is no longer believed to be the work of a wild animal. Officials urge residents to stay indoors and report any suspicious activity." My stomach twisted violently. They were lying. Yesterday they had insisted it was a bear, wolves. But this wasn't something people did. I could barely breathe. Alex was out there. And this was what they were finding. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. I don't know how long I stayed there. Curled up on the bathroom floor, my face pressed against the cold tile, my body trembling. At some point I must have drifted in and out, because the next thing I knew, my phone was buzzing against the counter. I blinked. The screen glowed in the early morning darkness. Principal Marywood. I swallowed, forcing myself to answer. "Hello?" My voice was hoarse, weak. Her voice was soft, careful, too careful. Cassie, good morning. I heard about Alex yesterday. Is he still missing? I swallowed hard, my throat tightening. Yes. A pause. And then, oh honey, don't come in today. I sat up a little, blinking in confusion. What? Why? The school is closing for now. I struggled to process her words. Closing? For what? Her voice dropped to a near whisper. It's not safe right now. Stay home. Be with your family. A sharp laugh almost escaped me. My family? My family was missing. The call ended, but I barely processed it. My thoughts were racing. My hands were trembling. The school was closing. Even they knew things were getting worse. The TV was still on when I walked back into the living room, the soft glow casting eerie shadows across the walls. A new anchor now, a new update, hundreds of people, missing, even more found, dead, skinned, unidentifiable, not just in Maine, across the country. I stood there, gripping my arms, nails digging into my flesh. I needed to feel something real. Because this didn't feel real. I imagined Alex, somewhere in that forest, rotting. The thought sent me stumbling back. My stomach lurched, my body shaking. I barely made it to the couch before my knees buckled beneath me. I couldn't do this. I couldn't breathe. I curled into myself, wrapping my arms around my body as if that would keep me whole. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake up, because this couldn't be real. And I didn't know what to do. I don't remember making the decision. One moment, I was curled up on the couch, shaking, the TV flashing images of skinned bodies and missing persons reports. The next, I was moving. I don't even know when the idea took hold, but once it did, nothing could stop it. I called Sharon. Her voice was strained, tired. Cassie, I promise we'll find him. Any updates? My voice barely sounded like my own. She sighed. No, that single word sent ice through my veins. No updates. No signs. Nothing. I squeezed my eyes shut. I could hear the way she hesitated before she spoke again, her voice quieter, but more urgent. Cassie, do not even think about going after him. It is not safe. My fingers tightened around the phone. I ended the call without another word, because I had already made up my mind. The road stretched before me, empty and silent. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles ached. Alex's last text was still open on the screen. Got called to a case in the park. Will be home late. I read it over and over again. He had told me exactly where he was going, and no one had seen him since. My pulse hammered in my ears as I pulled up to the entrance of the forest. Police tape was stretched across the trees. Patrol cars were parked along the road, officers standing near them, their faces drawn tight with exhaustion and tension. I parked and climbed out, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I spotted him almost immediately, Alex's boss. His expression darkened the second he saw me. Cassie. I didn't waste time. Where is he? His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Where is he? I repeated, my voice sharp, desperate. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. We don't know. The ground tilted beneath me. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. What do you mean? You don't know? His lips pressed into a thin line. The search party we sent after them is missing now, too. I staggered back. Missing. The people they had sent to look for Alex. Gone. Just like him, just like Tim, just like Marcel. My whole body went cold. I barely registered his voice when he spoke again, his tone lower, sharper. Cassie, listen to me. He stepped closer. No one is allowed into that forest. You try, and I'll have to arrest you. I nodded. I turned around. I walked back to my car. And the moment I was out of sight, I kept driving. A mile down the road, there were no cops, no flashing lights, no tape, just trees. Thick, towering trees that swayed slightly in the breeze, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers. I pulled over, killing the engine. For a few moments, I just sat there, gripping the wheel. I shouldn't be here. I knew that. But I couldn't sit back and do nothing. I reached over, popping open the glove compartment. My fingers curled around the flashlight, cold and smooth against my palm. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe. Then I stepped out of the car. The air was different here, colder. The scent of damp earth filled my nose as I stepped forward, pushing through the undergrowth. The trees loomed above me, casting long, spindly shadows across the ground. I knew better than to call out Alex's name. I wasn't stupid, but I had no idea how I was supposed to find him. I kept moving, my footsteps crunching over the leaves, the flashlight heavy in my grip. The farther I went, the quieter it became. There was no wind, no birds, no rustling in the trees, just silence. A wrong kind of silence. Then I saw it. A body. Sprawled out on the forest floor, motionless. My breath hitched in my throat. The skin was gone, raw muscle exposed, glistening red and pink in the dim light. The flesh looked wet, streaked with dried blood, the body unnaturally still. The smell hit me all at once. Rot, metallic and sour, thick and cloying. My stomach lurched. I barely made it to the nearest tree before I threw up. I pressed my hand against the bark, my whole body shaking. This was real. This was so real. I swallowed hard, stumbling away from the body, trying to get my breath back. And then, a voice. "Miss?" I froze. A few feet ahead, a man stood between the trees, tall, too tall. And he was wearing Alex's uniform. The air turned heavy. The second I saw him, my body locked up, every nerve in my body screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. The man, if he was even a man, stood perfectly still, watching me from the shadows between the trees. Tall, too tall, and he was wearing Alex's uniform. My pulse slammed against my ribs, my breath coming in short, sharp bursts. His face, I knew that face, but something was wrong with it. It was off, like it didn't fit right, like it was trying too hard to be human. Then I saw it. The seam. A thin, dark line running along the base of his neck, like someone had stitched it there. A horrible, lurching nausea twisted through me. I barely choked out a whisper. "Alex?" The thing tilted its head, its expression never changed. And then, it spoke. "Miss, you shouldn't be in the forest." The voice was too normal, too calm, like it was mimicking human speech, but it wasn't quite right. I staggered back, my hands trembling, my breath hitching in my throat. "What the hell have you done?" The thing stared at me, and then I saw it realize. It knew. It knew I knew. A slow, unnatural grin spread across its face, a mouth that wasn't meant to smile that way. It lifted a hand, adjusting the loose skin around its jaw, pulling it tighter over its skull like a mask. "Well," it murmured, "now I can't let you go." My body snapped into motion. I started running. Branches tore at my arms as I sprinted through the trees, my breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. I could hear it behind me. Moving, fast, not running like a person, not chasing like a man, but something else. Something that didn't belong. A low, clicking noise filled the air, an inhuman sound that rattled down my spine. And then, the sound of limbs snapping, not from stepping on branches, but from its body breaking apart. I glanced back just for a second, and that was a mistake. The thing had dropped to all fours. Alex's uniform hung loose on its body now, the fabric too big, too wrong. And its hands, they weren't hands anymore. They were claws. Long, curved talons that dug into the dirt, propelling it forward in jerky, unnatural movements. My chest tightened with terror. It wasn't just wearing his skin. It was pretending to be him. I wasn't going to make it. The realization hit me like ice water to the face. I was too slow. And it was too fast. I tripped. I hit the ground hard, my hands scraping against the dirt, my lungs burning from the impact. Before I could push myself up, it was on me. A hand wrapped around my throat, lifting me off the ground. I choked, clawing at its grip, kicking uselessly. The thing pinned me against a tree, holding me there like I weighed nothing. Alex's face was still there, but it was slipping. The seam along the neck was pulling apart, revealing something underneath, something dark, wet, glistening. The thing reached up with its free hand, carefully adjusting the loose skin around its jaw, like it was putting on a mask made of him. Tears burned in my eyes. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. And then I saw it, the tattoo on its chest, a small faded C right over its heart. Alex's tattoo, the one he got for me. I let out a shaking, broken sob. Alex was gone. This thing had taken him, worn him. My vision blurred at the edges, the pressure around my throat increased. I was gonna die, and then everything went dark. I woke up to agony. It wasn't the dull, aching kind of pain. It was sharp, white-hot, blinding, like my entire body was on fire. I tried to move, to scream, to fight, but I couldn't. I couldn't move at all. At first my vision was blurry. Shapes swam above me, dark figures bending over my body, their faces shadowed. And then, the pain sharpened. I sucked in a ragged, wheezing breath, my body shuddering violently as the burning sensation ripped through my arms and legs. I could feel it, feel them, cutting me open. My eyes rolled back in my skull, my breath coming in short, shallow bursts. I wanted to scream, to fight, to do anything, but I couldn't. I was trapped, paralyzed. My head lolled to the side, and through the haze of pain and nausea, I saw them. Two figures. One still wearing Alex's skin. The other was hunched over me, a jagged blade in its two long fingers, slowly peeling the flesh away from my arm in long, delicate strips. I watched in horror, my breath stuttering in my chest. The skin peeled back, revealing the raw muscle underneath, slick and red and glistening in the dim light. I could feel the air hitting my exposed nerves, the cold seeping in. A horrible, wet, tearing sound filled my ears. I tried to move, to scream, to do something, anything, but my body wouldn't respond. The thing kept working, unbothered, methodical, precise. It wasn't just killing me, it was harvesting me. Through my fading vision, I saw them lean in close. The thing wearing Alex's skin was whispering to the one cutting me, its voice low, almost soft. I couldn't make out the words, but the way it spoke, the way it gestured at me, its head tilting slightly, its fingers brushing against its stolen skin as if adjusting a mask. They were discussing me, choosing what to take, what to wear. I was going to die like this. I was going to end up like Alex, stripped down to muscle and bone, discarded in the woods while something else walked around in my skin. A sob bubbled up in my throat, but I couldn't even make a sound. The thing tilted its head toward me, studying me. And then, a gunshot. The sound exploded through the air, ringing in my skull. The figure above me jerked violently, its body snapping back, a horrible shrieking sound tearing from its throat. The thing wearing Alex's skin whipped around, a low growl ripping from its mouth. Another gunshot. Then blackness. The next time I woke up, it was to light, bright, sterile, blinding. Something beeping nearby. A soft murmur of voices. I tried to move. Pain screamed through me. I gasped, my body arching involuntarily, my nerves flaring to life all at once. A hand pressed against my shoulder, firm but gentle. "Cassie, you're safe." The voice was calm, careful. I blinked, my vision swimming. A man stood beside me, a doctor. He was shining a light in my eyes, checking my pupils. "Cassie," he repeated. "Can you hear me?" I tried to speak, tried to move. The moment I did, a wave of agony tore through my limbs. I screamed. The pain was all-consuming, unbearable. They must have expected it, because within seconds a cold sensation rushed through my veins, a sedative. The pain dulled. The world faded again. This went on for days, in and out, pain and darkness, until finally, I was awake enough for them to explain everything. Alex's boss had found my car abandoned on the side of the road. He knew. He knew I had gone in. He went after me, hoping I wasn't too far. When he found me, I was being skinned alive. They had already peeled the flesh from my arms and legs, working carefully, as if they had all the time in the world. He shot one of them. The other ran. He pulled me out and raced me to the hospital. But it was too late for some parts of me. The infection set in fast. They had to amputate one of my arms. The rest of me, I didn't know how to live without skin. They told me what they knew about the things in the forest, which was almost nothing. They weren't human. They weren't animals. They wore skin. They lured people in, peeled them apart, and used their bodies like clothing. No one knew what they looked like underneath. No one knew where they came from. The only thing they were sure of, there were more of them than us. I survived. But I don't know if I can call this living. I wake up every night to phantom pain. My nerves screaming, reliving every moment of the blades slicing through my flesh. I can't look at myself in the mirror. I can't feel anything but raw muscle and bandages. I can't even pretend I'm whole. And worst of all, Alex is still out there. Somewhere in that forest, rotting. While something wearing his face is walking around like he's still here.